this Sunday on Rosemary Barton Live.
They started it, we're going to finish it.
Trading leverage. The U.S. says it wants concessions before starting official trade talks. Will the ban on American liquor be on the table? I'll ask Manitoba's Premier Wab Kinew.
We're ready to go. We want to sit down and to have what is called the negotiations.
Standing firm, the Prime Minister's new advisory committee on Canada-U.S. economic relations holds its first meeting tomorrow. How can they help the government negotiate? Committee member Jean Charest is here.
These projects are going to help us lead Canada.
Pipeline politics. Ottawa approves plans for a new LNG pipeline to BC's coast as Alberta pushes for an oil pipeline along a northern route. BC's Minister of Energy, Adrian Dix, joins me. It all starts now on Rosemary Barton Live. Thanks for joining us on this Sunday. We are going to begin, though, with the shooting that took place at the annual White House Correspondents' Dinner last night, attended by the U.S. President and First Lady. A gunman burst through a security checkpoint towards a hotel banquet room where Trump and members of his cabinet were located. That's the moment that gunshots rang out. Some guests were having their photos taken there on the red carpet. They ran for cover, unsure where the shooter was. The president was removed from the room and no one was seriously injured. The CBC's Washington correspondent, Paul Hunter, was at the dinner last night and he joins me live this morning. Thanks for doing this, Paul. Obviously, must have been very scary. Tell me what it was like inside that room.
It was unreal, Rosie. We were right at the door, just inside the doors where outside and around the corner those gunshots were fired. When I heard it in the clip you just played, I got shivers. It was so loud and so unexpected. I mean, the security around that thing last night, because the president was there, take the taxi to the hotel, can't get anywhere near it, have to walk. First, when you approach the hotel, where's your ticket? When you get up near the hotel door, where's your ticket? When you get to the hotel door, where's your ticket? Go inside down the escalator, can you get here? Do you have the ticket? Yes. Then there's the magnometers before you get in the room, because all of this is expected, because it's the president. And then as we sat down, the event was just beginning, hubbub, waiting for the show to really kick in, and then those gunshots. At that moment, shortly after that, after things settled, I'll pick up the story in a second, but I just want to play you a clip. I turned on my iPhone and sort of just tried to describe what I was seeing once things had settled. Here's a little bit of that.
I don't even know what's happening here. The room now is on a kind of, it's on lockdown. All we heard, we were sitting over here, you see just over my shoulder, sort of that table over there. And just as the thing was getting underway, like loud pop, 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 gunshots, and like everybody hit the floor, having no idea what was going on.
In fact, Rosie, at first, I thought, is this like some sort of bad taste skit? Because it seemed so unreal that such a thing could happen in a place where the president of the United States was. But then you realize, no. People started shouting, shooter, shooter, get down, get down. So everybody's ducking under tables, chairs are flying. I'm hiding behind a big concrete pillar. And all you're thinking, Rosie, is will shooters now come through that door and start spraying the room? You're really thinking this. Is there another person in this? If somebody got that close, is somebody in the room now with a gun? And then when things settled, right, the first word was that the guy was shot and killed. That didn't turn out to be true. But as things settled, doors are all closed in the ballroom. I look up, Trump's gone, long gone, and all you see are Secret Service agents streaming in from all corners of the room, and you're thinking, how could there even be so many of them? And they're rushing toward all the cabinet secretaries at the front. Marco Rubio was there, Kash Patel was there, Scott Bessent, they were all there. Then they sort of push them and they get out, right in front of us. It was... And then things settled and we're in lockdown for an hour. But to experience that and to hear those gunshots again that you just played, it underlines the surreality of the whole thing. Again, the president of the United States was in the room, this highly securitized room, and yet that happened.
Yeah, astonishing. And I mean, initially there was a hope that the event would continue. The president was adamant that he speak to American people last night. You know all this, Paul. And I guess we're learning a little bit about the suspect. I am happy to hear about all that security because it was very unclear to me how the suspect would have even gotten into the hotel to begin with.
Exactly. Cole Thomas Allen, 31 years old, part-time teacher from Los Angeles, apparently a guest at the hotel, but nobody knows, right? I mean, he didn't get past the metal detector section. That's where it all kind of played out. But nobody knows. I mean, the fact that he's alive, maybe we'll learn. I don't know. But in truth, Rosie, it underlines that this is the kind of stuff that happens in this country, right? Consider the previous assassination attempts on Donald Trump. Consider this was the Hilton Hotel in Washington where Reagan was shot, right? Consider that also among those politicos in the crowd was RFK Jr., whose dad was shot and killed at a political event in Los Angeles, whose uncle was shot and killed in Dallas in 1963, right? When the cabinet secretaries were being marched out of the room, they were being pushed right by our table because we were by the main door. There goes Kash Patel. Well, there goes Steve Scalise, Republican, Republican Majority House Leader, who himself was shot famously at that baseball game, that political baseball game in D.C. about a decade ago. This is what happens in a country where there are 400 million guns and 360 million people. Trump himself said it's a dangerous gig being a national leader in this country, and he's not wrong.
Paul, I'm glad you're okay. Thank you very much for coming in and telling us about a really difficult, challenging experience last night. Thanks, Fred.
Thanks, Rosie.
Turning to this country now, multiple U.S. officials voiced frustration this past week with Canadian provinces that refused to sell American liquor as part of the response to the U.S. president's tariffs. Manitoba, one of the provinces with a ban, as Canada and the U.S. attempt to find some common ground and reopen formal trade negotiations. I spoke to Manitoba Premier Wab Kinew about the ban and what these public grievances could mean for the province. Premier Kinew, nice to see you again.
Thanks for having me back.
So the U.S. Trade Representative Jamieson Greer said this past week that the U.S. is at the end of its rope when it comes to the province's alcohol bans. Secretary Lutnick has called it insulting and disrespectful to America. Manitoba still has that ban in place. What is your reaction to those comments?
They started it, we're going to finish it, I guess. We want the tariffs taken off. I mean, this was an unprovoked attack on Canada on the trade front, and it's Lutnick and Greer's boss who did it, Donald Trump. So if they want the booze back on the shelves, then take the tariffs off our products. And if you're an American, you're watching this, the prices in America went up because of tariffs, and then you, the consumer, are paying more, but the refunds are going to big business. It's just been a disaster from the Trump administration's economic policy.
Greer even said that the U.S. may have to take enforcement action. I'm not sure what that means if the bans aren't lifted, but I wonder why you think this particular move has been such a source of frustration and irritation for them.
Well, I think it starts from the fact that people like their booze. So it definitely attracts the attention anytime you touch the stuff. I think we also know that, a good politician won't raise the price of beer. Donald Trump is doing that in America, so that's definitely a violation of Politics 101. And on top of making things more expensive for the average consumer, Donald Trump is also shutting off export opportunities for businesses in his country. So, of course, Lutnick and Greer and, all the Trump team have to make a lot of noise to try and cover up from the fact that Donald Trump's trade policy has been a disaster for Americans. And the reality is, we're Canada. We're a nation of hockey players. We're not looking for trouble, but if you push up, if you push us, we're not going to back down.
There was a lot of sort of incremental movement over the past week on this file. And of course, Mexico started its official negotiations on CUSMA. That has not happened for us yet. What are you being told by the Prime Minister? What are your concerns about the progress or lack of progress being made?
Well, I think Prime Minister Mark Carney is doing a good job, given a tough hand that he and our country has been dealt. I think the Prime Minister has been keeping us updated as First Ministers along the way, along with his team too. Yeah. I've had the opportunity to speak with Ambassador Wiseman, Dominic LeBlanc, and others have joined our conversations to keep us updated. But, we just need to keep sight of the real situation here. You have an erratic president who's fully pot committed to a terrible trade policy, and now the prime minister of our country has to find a path forward to protecting our economy and growing our jobs while also being mindful of a very, very sensitive ego in the White House office. And so, you know, the prime minister has my support. First and foremost, this is about Manitoba jobs. And when Americans threaten our jobs with tariffs, we're going to send that message. We're not going to sell your alcohol. And we're sorry if that harms hardworking Americans out there. But you know what to do when it comes time to vote in the midterms or comes time to vote for president again. You know, throw the bums out, as the saying used to go.
There was talk through the week about a U.S. desire to see further concessions from Canada to make sure those official talks actually start. There's also a suggestion from both the chief trade negotiator and Dominic LeBlanc that some kind of tariff is probably going to stick when it comes to those sectoral tariffs. Do you see room for other concessions? Do you think that there is further leverage for Canada?
Well, I think we should demand the release of the Epstein files. Donald Trump clearly doesn't like them. He always does something pretty wild anytime the Epstein files come up. So I'm just floating this as an idea to put the Americans on the back foot, the American administration anyways. Let's demand the release of the Epstein files. Something tells me that they won't be talking a lot of tough talk about our country if we put the conversation there.
But that's not leverage we have. I mean, that's something you could put on the table to sort of feed into domestic concerns in the U.S. What about leverage that Canada actually has?
Oh, well, what was the 51st state talk or the Greenland talk, right? It's just made up bluster. So if we're in a game of talking trash, then why doesn't Trump release the Epstein files? What is he hiding? If they release the Epstein files, then maybe we'll put the American booze back on the shelves.
Let me move on to a couple of other files. One, the Port of Churchill. I know that you met with the Prime Minister and there was a conversation about year-round shipping to Europe. You said that you could commit to shipping LNG by 2030. I wonder how you can commit to that timeline, given that the project has not been declared a major national project. I don't think you've had additional funding yet. Why are you so confident that you could commit to that timeline?
Well, this is the Prime Minister's timeline. He said he wanted LNG shipping by 2030, which is very, very aggressive considering we haven't started construction yet.
Yeah.
But the answers to the questions that you posed there, I think, are that we want the private sector to be the one making the investment. We'll be with the regulatory and the engagement and consultation side. And we just want to make sure that this investment happens. And to be clear, you know, I interpret the Prime Minister's timeline also as a bit of a challenge, meaning it's not just, I want to see this happen by 2030. I think there are obviously a bunch of naysayers in the federal bureaucracy or wherever that's coming from. And, you know, I think this is his way of saying, well, if you can't make this happen in the next 3.5 years, then, you know, we're probably going to move on. So it's probably helpful and clarifying for us to have a clear timeline to measure ourselves against. It's going to be very, very aggressive, probably more quickly than any major project in the history of this country has gone through regulatory and front-end engineering and design phases. But I think that's what the moment demands. You know, we have an unprecedented situation with our closest ally and nearest trading partner, most important trading partner. We've got unprecedented instability around the world. We have an opening right now with European Union countries like Germany, Asian countries like India to expand trade. And so we're just stepping up as Manitoba to try and get these Western Canadian resources to international markets.
Alberta's government announced this week that it is going to follow suit like British Columbia and get rid of daylight savings time, which means the pressure is on you, Premier. What are you going to do if everyone around you loses it and you're still with it? Are you giving any serious consideration to that?
Oh, definitely. Yeah, I think the days of Manitoba switching the clocks twice a year are pretty much at the end. The question for us is whether we want to move to, permanent daylight time, permanent standard time. This is where it always gets muddied and confusing. My personal choice is I think we should go to Saskatchewan time year round. It's better for the health benefits, lower incidence of stroke and other chronic health conditions. But most people, they want to go the other way. They want the extra hour of sunlight in the summertime. So what we're going to do is some consultation, some outreach over the next few months, let people have their say, try to raise awareness around the health benefits of the various options. And then we'll make that change likely by the end of the year. But just to be clear, just to make one other quick point, if Alberta moves to permanent daylight, Saskatchewan stays where they are, and if we move to permanent standard time, you could have a prairie time zone, if I'm thinking through the issues correctly. So that might be beneficial for interprovincial trade, and it might be a little bit of an unforeseen benefit if the 3 prairie provinces are all in the same time zone year round.
I'll end on a more serious question. On Saturday, you are expecting to announce that the province is going to move forward with a social media ban for those under 16. Why have you made that decision? How do you plan to make that work?
Yeah, well, I think it's really important for the mental health of young people and just the freedom for young people to be kids while they're growing up. You know, you have these massive tech oligarchs who have made themselves unprecedentedly rich by giving preteen girls body issues and exposing young people to human trafficking and putting toxic content in front of young preteen boys' minds. Like, it's a shameful way to make a living. And most importantly to us in Manitoba, it's a real travesty in terms of what should be the prime years of helping the young brain grow so that they can be the great Canadians we want them to be in the future. So we're just going to simplify things. I think it'll help parents too, who are probably spending a lot of heartburn and stress trying to navigate these issues with their parents. If maybe mom and dad don't have to be the bad guy, they could just point the finger at the premier and say it's his fault. I'm happy if that helps the average family out there. And then just when it comes to implementation, we'll be working over the next few months with families and teachers in the province just to make sure that we get the message out. To be absolutely clear, the accountability is not to be on the parents or the family or the kid. The accountability will rest on the big tech platforms. When it comes to parents and kids, our approach will be education. But when it comes to the accountability and living up to this ask, that's where we'll be going to the big tech platforms, most of whom are American.
Okay, well, let's talk about that again as that gets underway over the next few months, Premier. Always nice to see you. Okay, thanks for making the time.
Likewise, have a great weekend.
You heard there, provinces standing strong so far in their U.S. booze ban, but with mounting pressure from the states, could Ottawa get involved?
You never roll over to a bully. You confront them head on. One of our tools is alcohol.
Coming up, I'll speak to another member of the Prime Minister's Canada-U.S. Advisory Committee. That fellow there, Jean Charest, is up next. You're watching RBL. Members of the Prime Minister's new Canada-U.S. Economic Advisory Council set to have their first meeting tomorrow here in Ottawa. It comes as the U.S. is looking for Canada to make some concessions before coming to the negotiation table.
There are a series of trade issues between the countries. Most of the issues have been raised by the United States. It's a negotiation. These things have their own rhythm, and they also have what's happening above the surface and what's happening below the surface.
Prime Minister Carney revived the council, first created by Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, swapping out members to focus a little more on the private sector. Former Quebec Premier Jean Charest was one of the few members asked to stay on in Carney's council, and I spoke to him earlier. Jean Charest, nice to see you again.
Thank you, Rosie.
So you have stayed on the council. This is your second go round, and I would say things are not getting easier. The trade representative Jameson Greer says that Americans are at the end of the rope with these alcohol bans. You are a former premier. Do you think that the federal government should be asking the provinces to put that back on to try and ease tensions between Canada and the U.S.?
Well, the short answer is no. And, you know, this is a provincial jurisdiction. The provinces were not edged on to take American alcohol off the shelves. They did it on their own initiative, and it was a pretty unanimous move. And by the way, I mean, there's a reason why that happened. Maybe that's the question that the American side should ask themselves. Why did they do this? Well, we know why. And if they have an answer to that question, well, then we can start talking.
Do you buy that that is a real irritant, or do you think that they're just looking for things at this point?
I think it is a real irritant. I think, you know, the people in the American industry are feeling the effects of that. And by the way, this is not something that's directed at the American people or the industry itself. It's not as though we're mad at them. We're responding to something that's happening at a political level and continue to believe that we're very lucky to live next to the United States, and the American people are friends and allies, and that will continue to be the case for the future.
There was a lot of talk this past week about concessions, and I think, from what I understand from Canadians, the feeling is that the concessions have already been made, whether it, you know, retaliatory tariffs drops, digital services tax. Do you have the impression that these official talks on CUSMA will actually start if Canada gives up something else? Do you think that should be on the table?
I don't think so. We've made it very clear that we've been open to sitting down and having those conversations, that negotiation, and we're ready to go. And we're not trying to rag the puck. We're not trying to go fast. We're just trying to, and we want to sit down to have what is called the negotiations. And it happens to be a conversation on both sides of the table. And so that's where we are right now, and I anticipate that at one point that will happen, because it's common sense that it happen.
You're saying there's no attempt to rag the puck, and I believe you, but I do think that there is an acknowledgement from the government side, and perhaps around your table, that time is a beneficial thing here because of the U.S. economy, because of the midterms.
Well, you know, time is a factor, and when I say we're not trying to rag the puck, we're not trying to be, you know, smart, outsmart our American neighbors. The idea here is that it'd be the right conditions to sit down. Now, things have changed. The Supreme Court ruling that came down in January weakens the American position. And then there's the midterm elections. And the other part of it, at one point, Rosie, is that time goes on, there is a reasonable hope that the American private sector will speak up and make their voices heard. And because there's no one serious in the United States, but absolutely no one, who's saying, scrap this deal or tear it apart. There is no one. What they're actually people are saying is maintain the deal. And so if that's the case and we agree on that, why don't we just get serious and sit down and start talking about what we need to do so that either we continue on the same terms, either we make it better in the interest of both parties. That's where our mind is at this point.
There are several officials who say that July 1st deadline for the review won't be met, that it's more of like a checkpoint. Does it matter at this point if it's not met? Because things will just continue the way they are. Is that not what we would expect?
The assumption on both sides is that it will not be met on the 1st of July. There probably isn't enough time to deal with the issues that both sides want to talk about. And if it doesn't, well then we continue with the deal that we have now, the status quo, and then the sooner we can get around to having an agreement, the better. But it won't be, we're not going to use an expression you've already heard, we're not going to fall off a cliff on the 1st of July. We continue with things as they are.
What do you make of because you're one of the few people, maybe the only person, one of the few people, no, there's a couple people who got to stick around for a second version of this committee, this council. What do you think the Prime Minister was trying to do with this grouping of people this time and the other people that you're going to be meeting with on Monday?
Well, there's more private sector involvement. You may have noticed people like Tracy Robinson of CN, who also happens to be the chair of the Business Council of Canada, and Darrell White and a few people on. But this is, to be very clear, this is very much a sounding board with a conversation going two ways, us reporting back to the government what we see on the ground and what advice we can give them, and them reporting to us on where we are in the negotiations. That's quite different from the whole consultation process that Janice Charette, the head negotiator, is going to also be putting in place so that we are all, synchronized as we advance in these negotiations. The other part of it, frankly, as we look ahead, is that, we're probably at a point where in Canada we need to remobilize people at all levels, the premiers, the mayors, the people in the private sector, as we mobilize and talk to our American counterparts so that everyone has a good level of awareness of what's at stake here.
Sure. The federal government's presenting its spring update on Tuesday. Obviously, the economy is being heavily impacted by, what you're hoping to help them solve. Do you have the impression in your conversations with the Prime Minister or Minister LeBlanc that they feel that the economy is resilient enough to get through this, or that they are starting to get concerned about how long they can prop up some of these sectors?
There is a concern about the impact that all of this, what we call the Section 232s, have on the economy. And for those listening, we're talking about the steel industry, aluminum, softwood lumber, which is really impacted, especially in regions, not just urban centers. And then you have the automotive industry. And then the Americans changing the goalpost as we go along. They've redefined the application of the steel tariffs only a few weeks ago with a very real impact without giving anyone a heads up on the impact it's going to have. So when the Americans say to us, put the alcohol back on the shelves, our answer is, well, excuse me, what about the steel and the aluminum tariffs? And because it does have an impact. And the other impact, Rosie, is an intangible, and you could even define it as a tax. It's the uncertainty tax on the Canadian economy. There is, and I work for a law firm that has offices throughout all of Quebec. We feel it with our clients, and for them it's pretty simple. They don't know what's happening. They don't have a line of sight, and so for that reason they're holding back on decisions.
Okay. Jean Charest, thank you for making the time. I appreciate it.
Thank you, Rosie.
As we were just discussing there, that spring update is coming on Tuesday. Mark Carney expected to try to show that his government is managing the economy as energy and food costs continue to rise. How much focus will there be on the bottom line? Anything new there for Canadians dealing with the cost of living? The Sunday Scrum is standing by. You're watching Rosemary Barton Live.
Every Canadian who's paid their bills under this Prime Minister knows that he is wrong. It should not be a surprise that he got it wrong again. After all, Mark Carney has been wrong about every single economic issue of the last decade. He was wrong to support carbon taxes, wrong to support money printing that led to massive, rampant inflation, and he's wrong again to claim affordability is getting better.
Opposition leader there, Pierre Poilievre, questioning the Prime Minister's economic acumen this past week and going after some of his choices. This as the government prepares for that spring economic update on Tuesday. How well is the government responding to some of the challenges that Canadians are facing? What can we expect from the update? Let's bring back our Sunday Scrum. Stephanie Levitz is a senior reporter for the Globe and Mail's Parliament Hill Bureau. Rob Russo, a writer for The Economist, and Alex Boyd, a reporter for the Toronto Star, based in Calgary. Good to see you all again. Alex, I said I'd start with you, and I will. I don't have any leaks about the update at this stage. But I wonder what kind of balance you think the government has to walk here between, helping some Canadians, like the gal I spoke to in the last hour, and showing some progress on some of their big ticket items.
I think so much of this, I almost called it a budget. I keep forgetting that's now a fall thing. But so much of this is going to be a communications exercise and really getting across the point that they understand that Canadians are struggling, understand that they need to be doing more to help, and really making people feel like that's an issue that they see and they understand. This really opens up a new challenge, it feels like, for Carney's government, because, so much of his political success over the last year has been tied to the fact that people have been very worried about what's going on in the world right now. And he really presented himself as the person who was best equipped to, deal with the United States, deal with Donald Trump. But, that really hasn't meant that people's concerns about affordability or cost of living have gone away. They've just been overwhelmed by new different worries. And so this feels like it kind of invites a renewed focus on his ability to actually address some of those concerns, particularly since we're now dealing with, the aftershocks of things like, oil prices going up and the general war in Iran. So again, it kind of invites him to play in a different arena, and it remains to be seen if he's going to meet what Canadians want there.
Rob, what kind of pressure do you think is on the government to show that their choices are working, that the economy is doing okay, that they've and that they're hearing some of those things Alex is talking about? They're hearing that from the Canadians and responding to them.
I think it's a challenge for the Prime Minister. He was hired to do this job. Everybody has certainly they have aspirations. I think a lot of the support for the Prime Minister is aspirational, that he can deal with this, that he can deal with Trump. This will be a measure of that. There are people around him who sometimes worry that he gets technical in these instances and rather than empathetic. I note with interest that both he and the Finance Minister have announcements tomorrow. I'm sure that they will be aimed at affordability and trying to lay that down before we get the news in the economic update. And there are 3 or 4 things we should look for in terms of signposts in the economic update. Number one, is how's trade diversification going? Recent reports from Statistics Canada suggest it's going in the right direction. We've gone from about 3/4 of our exports going to the United States to about 67%. So it's certainly trending down. Is spending on track? Is that being kept in check? While at the same time, are they prepared to help out workers in the sectors that are being pulverized right now? Steel, aluminum, forestry. Yes, oil producing and energy producing areas of the country, Alberta, Saskatchewan, Newfoundland, are going to have some good things. And so is the federal government going to have some good news in terms of revenue. But at the same time, those tariffs are hitting at the same time as energy prices in areas of the country that are already reeling because of those tariffs. So I'm looking for those 3 or 4 things.
Stephanie, what are you watching for? And then how on the balance issue in terms of showing progress, which you and I have talked about on various panels, is the real challenge for the government right now?
Yeah, just while we were waiting to go on air, the finance minister put out a bit of a teaser video, I think, really trying to frame what is about to happen on Tuesday with this economic update. And it looks like it is definitely going to be, a series of showing Canadians, okay, what have we done in the last year? Let's recall that this update is coming on the 1-year anniversary of the Liberals winning their minority government in the in the spring of 2025. And it'll come also a day after their majority will be more or less certified, because the 3 new MPs are about to get sworn in. So it's a bit of a bookend, if you will. And in the video, Champagne really took people through what has happened over the last year, highlighting some of the bigger things like Rob talks about in terms of trade diversification, hitting on the affordability pieces that have been gone into place so far, and promising, in the finance minister's words, to build on that momentum. And that will be interesting. They have fiscal room. I mean, the projections coming towards, the end of the fiscal year suggested their deficit was going to be lower than forecast, but that doesn't, they've had a raft of new spending since the last budget. So probably that's going to be packaged into that. And to Rob's point, this issue of support for the workers most affected by these tariffs, the government is in a bit of a tricky position here, because much like when they decided to cut the gas tax, they acknowledge that puts budgetary pressure on the government. It's more government spending. And how long, as Conservative leader Pierre Poilievre pointed out recently when asked, would he support another round of bailouts, for lack of a better word, for these affected sectors? And he hedged, because he said, can you build an economy on a bailout economy? And I do think that a pressure facing the government is trying to convince workers in some of these affected sectors that these new major projects, these new initiatives, this new trade diversification will create new jobs down the line, potentially. But that's down the line, and people are worried right now.
Yeah, I wonder, Alex, I'll go back to you. If the deficit is a smaller number, and certainly there are indications that that's what we should expect, and it might be because of, cuts to government, it might be because of increased revenue, to Rob's point. But, that's just like something we are talking about in Ottawa. But, Canadians also need to know that if there's a deficit, that it's because the government is making choices that ultimately make their lives easier. And I don't know how much of that conversation is happening, around people's dinner tables.
Yeah, I think that's a tough thing to get across. I think one of the challenges always with these things is like how the economy is doing or how the budget is doing is always a slightly different problem than how people experience that budget or how they experience how the economy is doing. And so, really, I think the conversation that, people who are maybe not as politically engaged are having is around affordability. And so that, I think, is how they're going to be, framing this and seeing what's in it for them, what sort of, relief is coming down the pipeline. It also opens up an interesting opportunity for Poilievre, of course, because, he's fairly clumsily, tried to take aim at some of Carney's economic bona fides this week, whether that's a good idea, trying to go toe-to-toe with a guy who, has run not one, but 2 G7 central banks. But he really does seem to be trying to kind of steer the conversation around back to affordability. And of course, that's an area he's historically been very strong on. He's been better, for whatever reason, at speaking to some of these economic anxieties. So it's also going to be interesting to see whether he's able to kind of be part of that conversation as well.
Yeah, maybe Steph, I'll go to you on that. We are expecting, there's a press conference by Pierre Poilievre later today. We're expecting his sort of letter of demands out from the government later today. I also wonder if he's going after Mr. Carney's credentials to sort of set it up, right? To sort of say, if this guy can't get it done, it like almost manage the expectations in some way for Mr. Carney. But give me a sense of how you think they are responding to this.
Yeah, it's interesting. I mean, if Mr. Poilievre's premise is, as you suggest, Rosie, to say that, well, if this guy can't get it done, does that suppose then that people will look to Mr. Poilievre as the person who can get it done? I'm not convinced necessarily, because wasn't that the centerpiece of the last election, right? Who can get this done? And polls continue to suggest that Canadians, by and large, support Mr. Carney. But to Alex's smart point there, as the Conservatives sort of try and find new footing as now the real official opposition, which is to say we're in a majority scenario, there probably won't be an election. Anyway, there won't be a snap election at any rate in the same context as a minority government falling, of trying to figure out now what does it mean to be opposition. And it's a lot easier to oppose when you constantly, you also have to flip that with propose. Yeah. So Mr. Poilievre, his letter of demands, maybe there'll be some new things in there, but I anticipate it'll be similar to the arguments he's made all along with regards to things like industrial carbon pricing. He wants the government to lift the gas tax ad infinitum. to change environmental regulations, get things built faster. These are all things that Conservatives have advocated for quite some time. As of late, I've also noticed that the Liberals have been challenging the Conservatives to say, you want us to cut government spending, then give us a better list and we'll talk about it. So perhaps we'll start seeing a bit more of that from the Poilievre Conservatives.
I'm out of time, Rob. You'll forgive me, and you'll come back, I hope, even though I prevented you from talking a second time. Steph Levitz, Rob Russo,
I have nowhere
Alex
else to go, Rosemary. I'll be here.
There you go. Thank you all. Alex Boyd, thanks for joining us for the first time. Have a good Sunday, you guys. Federal government, we are actually going to have special coverage, of course, of the fiscal update. On Tuesday, you can join me and David Cochran at 4 p.m. Eastern right here on CBC News Network, and Power and Politics will have extensive coverage of that through their program after. Federal government has approved a new natural gas pipeline extension in BC. Projections show the project could lead to more jobs and money. We'll speak to BC's Minister of Energy right after this. You're watching RBL. The federal government is greenlighting a $4 billion expansion of the Enbridge West Coast natural gas pipeline in BC. The expansion will add about 140 kilometres of new pipeline from Fort Nelson down to the U.S. border. I spoke with BC's Minister of Energy and Climate Solutions, Adrian Dix, about this pipeline and what it means for his province. BC Energy and Climate Solutions Minister Adrian Dix joins me now. Nice to see you again, Minister.
Great to be on the show, Rosemary.
I want to talk about this particular announcement that came on Friday, the Sunrise natural gas pipeline. How big a deal is this in terms of the LNG industry in BC? What does it mean? What does it change for the province?
It's a big deal for BC. It adds to our energy infrastructure. It ensures adequate supply of natural gas to a very important LNG project, which is the wood fiber LNG project, which will be the lowest emission LNG in the world when it comes online very shortly. It also supports overall infrastructure in BC, and there's a real link, and Enbridge has done an excellent job with BC communities, including with First Nations. So in every way, this builds out our infrastructure.
The figure that Minister Hodgson said was $700 million in federal and provincial tax revenue. Is that what you estimate as well, and how significant an amount is that?
Over decades, but it's also in the present 2,500 jobs, $4 billion worth of investment, and of course it unlocks other investment. We do this, we're doing the North Coast transmission line, and while that has significant investment in its own right, it also enables, in that case, mining projects and LNG projects and port projects and other projects. So these energy infrastructure program projects are really important to BC, and it really reflects our point of view, which is we're working on projects that are near final investment decisions and taking them over the line with excellent proponents, sometimes BC Hydro, which is the public, sometimes private proponents, but in every case, really contributing to the economic life of the province.
How many more of those would you say are sort of nearing the finish line? Are we talking like half a dozen, or what kind of numbers are you talking about?
More than that. Okay. We've got LNG Canada 2 looking at final investment decision this year. Solicim's LNG looking at final investment decision this year. A joint venture between Fortis and the Musqueam First Nation slated for final investment decision this year. Dozens of mining projects, the North Coast transmission line slated for final investment decision. In short, these projects, tens of billions of dollars here in BC in investment, are going to help us lead Canada, I think, in terms of real projects that make a difference for us right now, and really promote the resilience of our province and our country and its economic potential in the future.
Okay, I want to talk about the other project that I ask you about all the time that is not underway yet, but there are sort of ongoing reports about movement and conversations happening around the pipeline to the West Coast. You have obviously said, you and the Premier have said, a northern pipeline is not realistic. Does that, and I think that's the preference of Alberta at this stage still. What does that mean about the idea of a southern pipeline? Because the Globe and Mail was reporting this past week that there is a conversation around that.
Well, the Southern Pipeline was in a report in the Globe and Mail with anonymous sources, and I directly asked Energy Minister Tim Hodgson about this. His spokesperson was quoted in the story as well as saying didn't come from him, if you will, and isn't his view. The Premier met with the Prime Minister yesterday virtually, and the Prime Minister indicated the same thing. So it's hard to say. What I say is what we continue to say, that unlike all the projects I just listed and many more, there's no proponent, there's no route, there's no plan. And it is the responsibility of the proponent, whether it's Alberta or Canada or a private company, and the agreement between, MOU between Alberta and Canada says it'll be a private company without public subsidy. It's up to them, surely, to actually present a project. What we say in BC is we've been very clear about the tanker ban in the North Coast. The Premier's been very clear about it. We have, for all kinds of very good economic and environmental reasons, and that we naturally expect to be consulted. Let's say one final thing, that the regulatory authority here is with the federal government. And so we hear a lot of these things and we're asked to respond to them, but nothing happened this week, except that there was apparently signals sent and other things sent. We were very direct, but mostly about our projects. But on this project, we said, of course we expect to be consulted by the federal government. But there, certainly in our direct conversations, what was indicated in the Globe and Mail, and I have a lot of faith, in Mr. Fife, who wrote that story. They're two excellent journalists who write that story, the Alberta energy correspondent and Mr. Fife. So I don't want to comment on that. But those are mixed signals, but they're not our responsibility.
Yeah, and I understand that, and I totally take your point. But I guess my point was, put aside whether the Prime Minister was putting it on the table or not, is there a world in which a southern pipeline actually makes some sense? Because you don't want it to go north, and that is not viable.
Well, here's what makes sense. And I've made this point before, Rosemary, but there's something called the TMX optimization project.
Yes.
And it's a real project. It's $3 to $4 billion. It will add the equivalent of 300 to 400,000 barrels per day through existing pipelines at a low price. Remember, $34 billion for about 580,000 barrels on the TMX twinning proposal of a number of years ago. This is about half of that for a tenth the price. Mostly, people are doing optimization projects like right now because they're way less expensive. BC hasn't been putting roadblocks into that project, which is a real project. We've been working on that project, and BC Hydro, in terms of electrification, has a key role. So we're prepared to work with people on real projects, but frankly, they have to have an obligation to get their act together. And we're increasingly saying it's important to be direct. There were April 1st deadlines in the Canada-Alberta MOU, as you well know, because you've asked about it, which were not met. And there still is no actual proponent. And that doesn't mean they're not working hard in Alberta and not working on their things in Alberta and Ottawa, but they have to also get towards the point where there's something real for us to look at, and a route that's real for us to look at. And I will not be shy about responding when that's the case.
Okay, Adrian Dix, always nice to see you. Thank you for making the time.
Great to be on the show, and best to you, best to everyone across the country.
Join us on Tuesday for the Spring Economic Update special. We'll kick things off at 4 p.m. Eastern. I'll be there. David Cochran will be there. We'll see you then. You won't want to miss it. Have a good rest of your Sunday.